The humid summer air hung heavy in the small town of Savannah, Georgia. You could smell the sweet scent of jasmine wafting through the cracked windows of the old, creaky house on Willow Street. Inside, everything was a mess, figuratively and literally. Old furniture with peeling fabric, mismatched plates, and cups that never seemed to be in their place. But it was home to Rachel, a woman in her late 20s who had made more than one questionable decision in her life. Rachel wasn't what you'd call an innocent soul, far from it. She was smart, manipulative, and oh so ambitious. She married Jeff to get out of her dead-end life, but over the years she'd realized that he wasn't the ticket to the life of luxury she had dreamed of. Jeff was a kind man, a hardworking one, but he was too much of a doormat. He loved Rachel, adored her even, but she didn't feel the same. She had a burning desire for something more, something that Jeff couldn't provide. That's when she met Marcus. Marcus was everything Jeff was not. He was the man with the fast car, the smooth talk, and the attitude that screamed, "I got everything I need and then some." Rachel first noticed him when he came into the bar where she worked as a waitress, tipping generously and cracking jokes that made everyone laugh. It wasn't long before they started exchanging numbers, then meeting in secret. What started as a fling quickly turned into something deeper, and before Rachel knew it, she was plotting something that would change everything. One evening, as the orange sun dipped behind the trees, casting a dim light through the window, Rachel and Marcus sat together in her living room, the tension between them thick enough to slice with a knife. Rachel was feeling daring tonight, and she couldn't hold back anymore. "Look," Rachel began, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous energy, "I can't do this anymore. I'm stuck in a marriage I never wanted. Jeff's too soft, and honestly, I'm not gonna waste my life on him, but if we could just get him out of the picture, things would be perfect." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading across his face. He wasn't a stranger to Rachel's manipulative ways, but something about the way she was speaking tonight made him feel even more excited. He liked danger, he liked the chaos. But this was on a whole other level. "You want to kill your husband, huh?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady. Rachel laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that made you feel at ease. No, this laugh was full of malice, the kind of laugh that made you shiver. She poured herself another glass of wine, the red liquid sloshing over the edge. "No," she replied, her tone sharper now. "I don't want to kill him, but he's gotta go. I've thought about it, and there's a way to make it look like an accident. A little something in his drink, just enough to make him slip away." Marcus's eyes sparkled as he leaned in closer. This was the kind of game he loved to play, the kind that involved taking risks, defying the rules, and coming out on top. "All right," Marcus said, his voice filled with a twisted excitement. "Let's say we do this." "What happens next?" Rachel grinned. "Once he's out of the picture, we can be together, Marcus. We can get married, live the life I always wanted. No more hiding, no more pretending, just us." The plan was set into motion. But what happens when Rachel's plan starts to go awry? Does she underestimate Jeff's loyalty? Will Marcus back out, or will Rachel get everything she's been plotting for? Find out in the next part. The days following Rachel and Marcus' conversation were a blur. Rachel felt the weight of their plan pressing against her chest, but the thrill of finally getting what she'd wanted for so long made it bearable. Every night she lay awake, her mind racing with the details of what needed to be done. This wasn't just some fling, it was the opportunity to completely rewrite her life. She couldn't just walk out of her marriage, not after everything she'd built. No, that would be too obvious. Rachel knew she had to play it smart, get Jeff out of the picture without raising any suspicions. She glanced over at Jeff one morning as he sat on the couch watching his usual crime dramas. He was so oblivious, so easy to manipulate. She could already see the cracks forming in their marriage. The spark they once had was long gone, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had no real attachment to him anymore. He was just an obstacle, a stepping stone to the life she was meant to have. Jeff was a good guy, but he wasn't the one who set her soul on fire. That was Marcus. Marcus understood her. He knew how to make her feel alive, like she could take on the world. Every moment spent with him left her feeling empowered, and now she was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to be with him. Later that evening, she called Marcus to finalize their plan. "All right, I've got the perfect opportunity," Rachel said, her voice low but determined. "We're having dinner tomorrow night. Jeff's been complaining about some stomach issues, so he'll be more than willing to drink whatever I put in front of him. I'll slip the poison into his drink when he's not looking. It'll look like food poisoning, nothing too crazy. The doctors will just chalk it up to some bad takeout or a stomach bug. By morning, he'll be gone." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Sounds easy enough. You sure he won't suspect anything?" Rachel's lips curled into a grin. "He trusts me, that's the problem. He always trusts me." The next day, Rachel went out and bought the poison, a slow-acting toxin that would make Jeff feel nauseous and weak within hours but wouldn't show any immediate signs of foul play. She got it from a shady corner of town where people like her went when they needed to disappear. The shopkeeper handed her a small vial wrapped in black tissue paper, and when she held it in her hand, a sense of power surged through her. This was it, the moment when everything would change. As she walked back to the house, Rachel couldn't help but feel a rush. It was the same thrill she'd felt when she first started seeing Marcus behind Jeff's back. It was the excitement of getting away with something, of having the upper hand. She couldn't wait to see the look on Jeff's face when he was too sick to understand what was happening. That night, as the clock struck 7 p.m., Rachel set the dinner table. She poured Jeff's drink, a simple glass of whiskey, and watched as it glistened in the dim light. She had already cooked a hearty meal of steaks and mashed potatoes, the kind Jeff liked. He'd been complaining about his stomach lately, but Rachel figured a nice dinner would be the perfect distraction. He wouldn't be expecting anything. She slipped the poison into his drink as she casually passed by him, her hand shaking just slightly, but she wasn't scared. No, she was too far in now to back out. She had already made her decision. Dinner went smoothly, or so it seemed. Jeff ate hungrily, chatting about his day at work, completely oblivious to the drink in front of him. Rachel kept her eyes on him, watching for any sign that the poison was taking effect. After a few glasses of whiskey, Jeff started feeling it. His face turned a little pale and he rubbed his stomach, clearly uncomfortable. Rachel feigned concern. "Babe, are you okay?" "You look a little off," she said, her voice sweet, laced with faux worry. "I don't know. My stomach's been bothering me all day. Maybe it's the food," Jeff muttered, leaning back in his chair. Rachel smiled, her insides twisting with excitement. "It's probably just a bug. I'll get you some water and we can just relax for the night. Don't worry about it." Jeff nodded, his eyelids growing heavy. His body slumped against the back of the chair and his speech became slurred. Rachel took a deep breath. The plan was working. But as the night wore on and Jeff became more and more incapacitated, a knot started to form in Rachel's stomach. This was it. The man who had been nothing but kind to her, the man who had loved her unconditionally, was slipping away. She should have felt guilt, but instead she just felt relief. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "Is he gone yet?" She stared at the message for a moment, her heart pounding. "Not yet," she typed back, "but he will be soon." She couldn't stop now, not after everything she'd done. Will Jeff survive the poison, or will Rachel's plan go off without a hitch? What will Marcus do when things start to take a darker turn? Stay tuned for part 3. The night dragged on like an endless, suffocating fog. Rachel watched Jeff as he slumped deeper into the chair, his face twisted in discomfort, his breathing shallow and uneven. The poison was working, but not fast enough. She could see him struggling to keep his eyes open, the life slowly draining from him. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest, a tight, cold knot that she tried to swallow down. This wasn't the way she imagined it. She thought he'd be out, unconscious by now. The bottle of whiskey, now half empty, lay next to his glass, the remnants of the poison swirling with the amber liquid. Rachel leaned forward, her hand gripping the back of the chair as she whispered, "Jeff, baby, you okay?" He groaned in response, but his eyes were barely open, the light in them dimming by the second. Rachel forced herself to maintain composure even though her heart hammered in her chest. She'd never seen him this weak before. Hell, she didn't even know what to do now. Her mind raced. Should she call 911? Was it too late to try and save him? What if he survived and they found out she was behind it? A cold shiver ran down her spine, but she quickly shook it off. No, she couldn't back out now. She'd come too far. This was the only way to move forward with her life, to be with Marcus, to escape from this small town and the suffocating reality she had spent years enduring. Rachel stood up, pacing around the room. She had to get rid of the evidence. The empty glass, the bottle, it all had to disappear fast. She glanced at Jeff, still breathing heavily, his hands clutching the arms of the chair. His skin was pale, his face twisted in pain. But as she started to walk toward the kitchen, something unexpected happened. A loud cough rattled through Jeff's chest, and then, to her horror, he violently lurched forward. His body jerked, convulsing for a moment before he collapsed against the table. His breath came in shallow, desperate gasps. Rachel froze, her feet glued to the floor. She was paralyzed. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Jeff's eyes fluttered open for a split second. He looked at her, his face racked with confusion and pain, and then he whispered, "Rachel, what did you do?" Her blood ran cold. The guilt she'd been pushing away rushed to the surface like a tidal wave. She could see the pain in his eyes, the shock, the betrayal. It was too much. She took a hesitant step back, the room spinning around her. I didn't do anything," Rachel stammered, but her voice sounded small, weak, and she hated how it betrayed her. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Her fingers fumbled over the keys as she tried to text Marcus. "Something's wrong, he's not going down like I thought." Before she could send the message, the phone buzzed in her hand. Marcus had replied, his words sharp and direct. "What do you mean? Is he still alive? Get rid of him, Rachel. Do what needs to be done." The coldness of his words hit her like a slap. Was that all she was to him? Just another tool to use, just another part of the plan to get what he wanted. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she quickly shoved the thought aside. There was no time for hesitation. Rachel looked back at Jeff, who was barely clinging to life now. His face was barely recognizable, his breath labored and shallow. She was losing him, and yet something inside of her hesitated. This wasn't just a random stranger. This was the man she'd married. This was the man who'd loved her through everything, even when she didn't deserve it. But Rachel pushed that voice to the back of her mind. She couldn't go back now. She had to follow through. She had to. But as she turned to walk away, the sound of Jeff's voice stopped her cold. "Rachel, I loved you," he croaked, his eyes filled with a mix of confusion and heartbreak. "I thought you cared about me." Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, like a knot had been tied inside of it. She couldn't look at him. She couldn't bear to see that look in his eyes. So instead, she turned and walked quickly to the kitchen, where she grabbed the half-empty whiskey bottle and started to clean up the mess she had made. But as she wiped down the glass, she heard a crash from the living room. Her stomach dropped. She rushed back into the room and found Jeff on the floor, his body convulsing in an agonizing way. His hands were clutching his chest, and he was gasping for air, struggling as if he was fighting to survive. Panic surged through Rachel's veins, and she screamed his name. Jeff, her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had planned everything perfectly. She'd followed the steps. Yet now it felt like everything was falling apart. "Jeff, hold on, please just hold on," she cried, kneeling beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to help him, but it was too late. His body stiffened, and then there was nothing, no more gasping, no more struggle, just silence. Jeff was gone. Rachel stared at him, completely frozen. The man she'd poisoned, the man she had vowed to leave behind, was gone. And she had done it, but there was no satisfaction, no feeling of relief, only an overwhelming sense of dread as she realized the magnitude of her actions. Her phone buzzed again, Marcus's name flashing across the screen. She opened it, staring at the message. "You did it?" She didn't answer right away. The weight of the situation crushed down on her, and for the first time, Rachel questioned everything she had done. Was it worth it? But with Jeff gone and Marcus lurking in the wings, Rachel's nightmare is far from over. Will she get away with it, or will everything unravel in the most unexpected way? Stay tuned for part 4. The silence in the room was deafening. Rachel could barely hear her own breathing over the pounding in her chest. She stared at Jeff's lifeless body on the floor, the weight of what she'd done pressing down on her like 1,000 pounds. She had killed him. No, she had murdered him, and for what? Her phone buzzed again, a quick, insistent reminder of Marcus. "Did you do it? What the hell's taking so long?" The words were cold, calculated. Rachel's fingers hovered over the screen, her mind racing. What was she supposed to say? That she had just watched a man die in front of her, that she was no longer sure she could go through with the rest of their plan. She quickly erased her initial response, fingers trembling, and instead typed, "It's done. But Marcus, something feels wrong. What if it's too much?" Her thumb hesitated before hitting send, but she knew she couldn't ignore him now. She couldn't let him think she was losing control, not after everything they had done, not when she was so close to getting what she wanted. She sat down, her knees weak as her mind replayed the moments before Jeff's death, his struggle, his confusion, the way his hand had reached out to her in desperation. "I loved you," those words echoed in her head, gnawing at her, shredding the carefully constructed barrier she'd put up between herself and any form of empathy. She had done this, but she wasn't sure if she was prepared for what came next. Her phone buzzed again. "You've been with him for how many years? A few seconds of pain to get everything you want. You better not back out now, Rachel. We both know what's at stake here." Rachel read Marcus's message over and over, her heart sinking with each word. He didn't care about the mess, he didn't care about the blood on her hands. All he cared about was what he wanted, what they had agreed to, the life he promised her. But Marcus was wrong. She wasn't sure if it was the guilt or the overwhelming realization that she had crossed a line she could never undo, but Rachel was starting to question everything. She had already killed Jeff, but would getting rid of him really solve everything? Could she go through with the next steps of their plan? She slowly got up from the floor and took a few shaky steps toward the front door. There was a knock. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it the neighbors, the cops? The one thing she didn't want was to get caught now. She hadn't planned for this. She wasn't prepared for the fallout. She had done it, but now that it was over, Rachel wasn't sure if she could live with herself. She peered through the peephole, her breath catching. It was Marcus. She opened the door quickly, but before she could speak, Marcus barged in, his eyes scanning the room. His gaze immediately landed on Jeff, lying lifeless on the floor. "Damn," Marcus muttered, not even hiding his lack of empathy. "I thought you'd have him looking more peaceful." Rachel swallowed hard, unable to speak. All she could do was stare at Jeff, then back at Marcus, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. She wanted to scream, to run, to push him away and beg for forgiveness, but she couldn't. She was trapped, entangled in this web of lies and murder. "Don't look at me like that," Marcus said, his tone suddenly sharp as if he could sense her hesitation. He closed the door behind him and walked over to Jeff's body, giving it a cursory glance. "It's done, and now we move on. You said it yourself. We can't back out now. We got this." Rachel shook her head slowly. "I don't know, Marcus. I don't know if I can do this anymore. This isn't what I wanted. I didn't think it would feel like this. I didn't think I'd feel guilty." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his smile faltering. "Guilty? You're really going to pull that card on me now after everything? You wanted this. You begged me for this. We talked about it for weeks. Hell, you practically dreamed of this moment, and now you're talking about guilt. You're a grown woman, Rachel. You did what needed to be done. It's over now. You're free." Rachel's eyes started to well up with tears. She bit her lip, trying to hold back the sob that threatened to break free. "I don't feel free, Marcus. I feel trapped. I thought I'd feel relieved, but instead I just feel empty." Marcus took a step closer, his eyes hardening. "You're not backing out now. You promised me, Rachel. We do this together or you go down alone. Do you want that?" Rachel's breath hitched in her throat. The weight of his words pressed down on her like a vice, suffocating her. She thought she had everything planned. She thought that once Jeff was gone, everything would fall into place. She thought she could walk away with Marcus and never look back. But now, in the quiet aftermath, she realized just how deeply entangled she was in a web of lies and murder, a web she couldn't escape from. "Marcus," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking, "I can't do this anymore." For a moment, there was silence. Marcus stood still, watching her carefully. His eyes were cold, calculating. "You don't have a choice," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "You made this bed, now you gotta lie in it." Rachel turned away from him, walking toward the window. The night was dark and the street outside was quiet. But inside, her world was spinning out of control. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and now she was bound to Marcus, a man who had no intention of letting her go. Now that Rachel's guilt is eating her alive, will she give in to Marcus' pressure? Or will she find a way to break free from the nightmare she's created? Find out what happens in Part 5. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of Marcus' words sinking deep into her bones. The room felt smaller, suffocating, like the walls were closing in on her. She could still hear Jeff's last words echoing in her mind. "I loved you." That simple, desperate confession was enough to shake her to the core. She had killed him. No matter how much she tried to justify it, no matter how many lies she told herself, there was no escaping that truth. Marcus' footsteps echoed behind her and she could feel his presence like a shadow looming over her every move. She didn't turn around, didn't look at him. She couldn't. The sight of him made her stomach twist. The anger in his voice only amplified the fear and regret that had taken root in her heart. "You're really gonna stand there and feel sorry for yourself?" Marcus asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "What do you think this is, Rachel? A damn rom-com? You don't get to back out now, you don't get to change your mind." She closed her eyes, trying to block out his words, but they seeped in, gnawing at her resolve. The guilt, the regret, it felt like it was swallowing her whole, suffocating her. She had planned it all, didn't she? She had carefully orchestrated everything, had convinced herself that this was the only way. But now, with Jeff's body lying cold in the next room, everything was different. Rachel spun around, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and fear. "You think this is easy? You think this is what I wanted?" Her voice cracked and she bit her lip, trying to hold it together. "I didn't sign up for this. I didn't know it would feel like this." Marcus took a step forward, his gaze hardening. "Yeah, you did. You wanted out of that life, Rachel. You wanted out of your dead-end marriage and you wanted to be with me. You wanted the life I promised you, and now it's time to take it. You knew what you were doing when you slipped that poison in his drink." She recoiled as though his words physically struck her. "I thought I knew what I was doing," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I thought it would be easy. But now," she paused, her throat tight, "now I feel like I've lost myself. I don't even recognize who I am anymore." Marcus' expression didn't soften. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You're just scared, Rachel. That's all this is. Fear. Fear of the consequences, fear of what you've done. But guess what? It's too late for that. We're already in this and there's no turning back now. If you back out now, everything falls apart. We'll both go down. You understand that, right?" She nodded slowly, but it wasn't in agreement, it was in resignation. Deep down, she knew Marcus was right. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and now she was trapped in the consequences. She had killed Jeff, but in her heart, she knew that wasn't all. She had killed a part of herself too, and the more she tried to justify it, the more she realized she wasn't the woman she had once been. "I don't want to go down this path anymore, Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be this person." Marcus leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "You already are, Rachel. And trust me, there's no going back. You're not the first woman to do something like this, and you won't be the last. But if you want to survive this, you better start owning your choices." Rachel's hands shook as she reached for the bottle of whiskey on the counter. She poured herself a drink, though she barely noticed the way the amber liquid sloshed into the glass. Her mind was clouded, her thoughts scattered. She wasn't sure what was worse, the poison she had given Jeff or the poison Marcus was slowly seeping into her soul. She took a long sip, trying to calm herself, but it didn't work. The burn of the alcohol didn't numb her thoughts, and the cold reality of what she had done settled over her like a shroud. The plan had been so simple in the beginning. Slip the poison into Jeff's drink, wait for him to die, and then walk away with Marcus. Start fresh. But now everything felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. "Marcus," Rachel's voice trembled as she turned to face him. "What if he wasn't the only one I needed to get rid of?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" Her lips curled into a bitter smile, but it was hollow, empty. "What if I need to get rid of you too?" Marcus's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. He had always known Rachel was unpredictable, but something in her tone sent a chill down his spine. He took a step back, a flicker of caution crossing his face. "You really think you can pull this off, huh?" Marcus said, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can just toss me aside and get away with it? You know who I am, Rachel. You know what I can do." "I don't care anymore," Rachel spat, her words sharp and filled with venom. "You're just a means to an end, Marcus, and now I don't need you anymore. I can finish this myself." She took another step toward him, her hand gripping the whiskey glass so tightly that it might shatter in her palm. Her thoughts were clouded, swirling with anger, fear, and the heavy weight of the choices she had made. She didn't know what she wanted anymore, but she knew one thing: she was done being anyone's pawn. Marcus held his ground, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not getting away from this, Rachel. You think you can just walk away from all of this, but you can't. You think you can kill Jeff and then just turn around and have your happy ending with no consequences. You're wrong." Rachel's mind raced, but something deep within her snapped. She wasn't scared anymore, she wasn't trapped by Marcus or Jeff or anyone else, she had taken her power back. For the first time in a long time, Rachel knew what she had to do. She lifted the glass in her hand, the liquid sloshing violently, and in a moment of clarity she tossed it aside, shattering the glass on the floor. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady but dark. "This ends tonight." Rachel's realization is clear now. She's done with Marcus and the life she's built, but what will happen next? Will she finally find the escape she's been searching for, or will the consequences catch up with her? Find out what happens in Part 6. The pieces of glass shattered on the floor, the sharp clink ringing through the room like a bell marking the end of something. For a split second, Rachel stood frozen, her eyes locked on the jagged shards that lay scattered across the room. It was almost poetic, really, a symbol of her life, broken, sharp, and dangerous. Marcus stared at her with an unreadable expression. His gaze shifted from the broken glass to Rachel, and for the first time there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't used to seeing her like this. Rachel had always been the one to call the shots. She had always been the puppet master, but now, standing in front of him, she looked different. There was something darker, something fierce in her eyes, and it unsettled him. "Rachel," Marcus began, his voice lower now, trying to regain control. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just throw everything away, not like this." Rachel didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she bent down and started picking up the pieces of the glass, her hands shaking, but with purpose. She wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't afraid of what he might do or of what might come next. She had crossed the line with Jeff, and there was no coming back from that. But this felt different. She wasn't going to be anyone's victim anymore. "You think I'm just going to keep playing along with your game?" Rachel finally spoke, her voice cold and steady. "You've had your fun, Marcus. You've used me to get what you wanted, and I've played along because I thought you were the answer. But now I see it for what it really is, just another one of your manipulations." Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not the problem here, Rachel. You are. You knew what you were getting into. You wanted this, remember? You wanted to leave Jeff, to be with me, to have everything you dreamed of." Rachel stood up, the pieces of glass still clutched in her hand, though they trembled slightly. "No," she corrected him, her voice now unwavering. "I wanted freedom. I wanted to be free, and I thought you could give that to me. But now I see I was just using you too, and you were using me." She tossed the glass shards to the side, her fingers still trembling. "You don't get to control me anymore." The tension in the room was thick, palpable. Marcus was now standing directly in front of her, his expression a mixture of frustration and anger. "You're making a huge mistake, Rachel. Do you really think you can just walk away from everything we've built? You're nothing without me. Don't forget that?" His words were meant to threaten, but Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she stared him down, her jaw set firmly. She had been afraid of him for too long, of what he might do if she tried to break free. But now, looking at him, she realized just how small he really was. His power over her was nothing more than an illusion. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, her voice unwavering. For a moment, there was silence. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Marcus, who had always been the one in control, who had always been the one pulling the strings, looked taken aback. He wasn't used to seeing Rachel stand up to him. He wasn't used to seeing her fight back. "Listen, Rachel," Marcus said, his tone now a little more measured but still dangerous. "You're making this harder than it has to be. I'm not going to let you ruin this. You don't get to just walk away and pretend everything will be okay. You've crossed a line. There's no going back." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment where she would either sink deeper into the chaos Marcus had created for her or rise above it and take control of her own fate. She could feel her pulse in her throat, each beat louder than the last. Her mind raced. Everything in her was telling her to run, to get out, to break free from this toxic, twisted situation. But there was something else too, a sense of power, of strength that she hadn't felt in a long time. It was like a switch had flipped inside her, and the woman who had been afraid, the woman who had followed Marcus without question, was gone. Rachel stepped back, holding her ground. She wasn't just going to roll over anymore. She wasn't going to let Marcus manipulate her. She wasn't going to let anyone control her life. Not now, not ever again. "I'm done with you, Marcus," Rachel said quietly, her voice full of finality. I've already done what I needed to do, but you're nothing to me anymore. Marcus' eyes flashed with anger, but Rachel didn't flinch. She had made her choice, and this time she was going to stick to it. You think you can just get away with this? Marcus growled, his voice low and threatening. You think you can just walk away from all of this without any consequences? Rachel took another step back, her eyes narrowing. I'm already dealing with the consequences, Marcus, she said, her voice steady. I've already lost enough, but if I have to lose you too, then so be it. For a moment, Marcus just stood there, glaring at her. He seemed to be weighing his options, calculating his next move. But Rachel didn't care anymore. She had taken control of her own destiny, and she wasn't going to let him stand in her way. Without another word, Marcus turned sharply and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty house, and Rachel felt her heart racing. She was free. She looked down at the shattered glass on the floor and took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. This wasn't going to be easy. There would be more consequences, more decisions to be made, but for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt like she could breathe. She had taken back her power, and now, for the first time in years, Rachel was in control of her own future. With Marcus gone, Rachel has freed herself from his grip. But will she truly escape the consequences of her actions, or will the past come back to haunt her in unexpected ways? Rachel stood alone in the quiet of the room, the remnants of the broken glass still scattered across the floor like the shattered pieces of her life. She could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, but inside everything was still. The silence was almost suffocating, but at the same time it was strangely comforting. For the first time in ages, Rachel felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed, or so she thought. Marcus was gone. She had told him to leave, and he had. It wasn't the confrontation she had expected, no dramatic fight, no final words, no tearful pleas. It was just over. Rachel knew that this wasn't the end of her problems, though. Marcus might be out of the picture, but the consequences of her actions would follow her like shadows. She had killed Jeff. That wouldn't just disappear. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, suffocating her in ways that even the distance from Marcus couldn't alleviate. She stepped over the broken glass, walking slowly toward the kitchen. She needed to clear her head. Maybe a drink, something to calm the nerves. But as she reached for the whiskey, something caught her eye, an envelope sitting on the counter. It wasn't there earlier. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a letter, one she hadn't seen before. There was no return address, no name written on the front, just her address scrawled across it in an unfamiliar hand. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, the edges rough against her skin. She stared at it for a moment, uncertain, before tearing it open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. Rachel, I know what you did, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. J. The letter was short, simple, and direct. But the effect it had on Rachel was immediate. Her heart dropped into her stomach, a wave of nausea sweeping over her. A chill ran down her spine, and for the first time since Marcus left, she felt fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that made her feel like the walls were closing in again. Jeff's death was supposed to be a secret. It had to be, no one could know, but this letter made it clear that someone did. Someone knew what she had done, but who? Her mind raced. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the letter was undeniably personal. It was someone who knew her, someone who was aware of the plan. But how? Rachel thought back to the days leading up to Jeff's death, the quiet moments where she thought she had everything under control. She had covered her tracks. She had made sure no one could trace anything back to her. But this letter was a stark reminder that she couldn't outrun her past. She sank down onto the couch, her mind swirling with possibilities. Who would want to expose her? Was it Marcus trying to get back at her? No, she had no doubt that he would have confronted her directly if he wanted revenge. He wasn't the type to hide in the shadows, so who else could it be? Rachel's eyes drifted to the window, the city lights casting a faint glow across the room. She thought about the people who had known her, really known her, in the past. There were a few, but none of them seemed like they would have gone to this length. Or maybe they did. Maybe someone had been watching her the whole time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her breath hitched. What if it wasn't someone from her past at all? What if it was someone who had been watching her more recently? What if they had known about Marcus and the affair? What if they had been following her all along, waiting for the moment when she would finally snap? The letter was a threat, a warning. But who was the sender, and more importantly, what did they want? The unanswered questions gnawed at her like an itch she couldn't scratch. The knot in her stomach tightened. She needed answers. She couldn't sit idly by waiting for whoever had sent this letter to strike again. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed the only number she knew she could trust. She had never wanted to involve anyone else, but now she didn't have a choice. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. "It's me," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "I need help. Someone knows what I did." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and Rachel could almost hear the wheels turning in the person's head. She didn't wait for them to speak. Instead, she continued, her voice filled with urgency. "I don't know who it is, but I need you to help me figure out who sent this letter. I don't know what they want, but I can't risk anyone finding out. Do you understand?" The person on the other end sighed, and Rachel could hear the doubt in their voice. "This is bigger than just you, Rachel. You're already in deep. Are you sure you want to go down this road? You've already made your choice." "I don't have a choice anymore," Rachel snapped, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not backing out. I'm not running from this. I need answers." The line was quiet for a moment before the person sighed again. "All right, I'll help you, but you need to be careful. Whoever sent that letter is watching you, and if they know what you did, they're not just going to let it slide." "Trust no one?" Rachel nodded, her mind racing. She couldn't afford to trust anyone right now, but one thing was clear: the past wasn't going to stay buried. Whoever had sent that letter was going to keep pushing until they got what they wanted. And Rachel had to find out who they were before it was too late. Rachel has made her choice, but her past is coming back to haunt her in ways she never expected. Who is behind the mysterious letter, and what do they want? The next chapter of Rachel's story is about to unfold. The days that followed felt like a never-ending spiral of tension and dread. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The letter was a clear warning, and she had no idea how far the person behind it was willing to go. Each time her phone buzzed, her heart would race. She had become paranoid, checking her surroundings, peeking out the window, expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Her meeting with the mysterious person she called for help hadn't provided any relief. They'd agreed to investigate the letter and figure out who had sent it, but Rachel wasn't sure if they were more invested in solving the mystery or in making sure she stayed out of trouble. Despite the promises of help, Rachel couldn't shake the weight of what she had done. Every time she thought about Jeff, she felt the crushing guilt again. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself that he would have never understood her. He never would have let her live the life she deserved, but none of that mattered now. He was dead, and the lie she'd built to cover it up was crumbling. She sat in her dimly lit living room, flipping the letter over and over in her hands. She had read it at least a dozen times, and each time it felt more ominous. "I know what you did." It was a phrase that haunted her. Someone knew, and whoever it was wasn't going to let her get away with it. Rachel had tried to go over the details of her plan, but nothing had slipped through her fingers. She had been careful, so careful. The poison had worked just as intended. There were no signs of foul play, no obvious clues. So why was this happening now? Was someone watching her that closely? A knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts, and her heart skipped a beat. She stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. No one ever came by unannounced. Was it the person who had sent the letter? She crept cautiously to the door, peering through the peephole. Her breath escaped her in a relieved sigh when she saw who it was. It was Sarah, her old friend from years ago. Sarah had always been there for Rachel, even when things had seemed impossible. When Rachel had married Jeff, she had tried to warn her, but Rachel had dismissed her advice, thinking she knew what she was doing. And now here Sarah was, standing on her doorstep with a look of concern in her eyes. Rachel opened the door slowly. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Sarah's brow furrowed as she looked at Rachel. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on." "Something's wrong, Rachel. I know you. You've been distant, looking over your shoulder. And then I hear rumors about Jeff, people talking about his disappearance, how no one's seen him, how there's something off about it. I'm worried about you." Rachel's stomach twisted at the mention of Jeff's disappearance. She had been careful, but maybe it wasn't enough. She'd covered all the details, made sure nothing was suspicious. But this. The rumors were starting to seep into the cracks, and she couldn't afford for anything to break open now. "I'm fine, Sarah," Rachel said, forcing a smile. I've been stressed out, you know how it is." Sarah didn't buy it. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. No, I don't know, but I know you're not fine. Something's happened. I can feel it. Rachel's eyes flicked to the table where the letter still lay, its words mocking her. She couldn't let Sarah see it, not yet, not until she figured out who was behind it. Rachel, Sarah continued, her voice softer now, you can't keep hiding from everything. You need to talk to me. Whatever it is, we'll get through it together. Rachel hesitated, her mind racing. She could feel the pressure mounting. She wanted to tell Sarah everything. She wanted to say the words that had been choking her for weeks. She wanted to explain that she had done something unforgivable, something that had changed everything. But the moment she opened her mouth, she realized something. She couldn't trust anyone anymore, not fully. Everyone had the potential to turn on her. Everyone had their own interests at heart. Marcus had been the closest thing to someone who understood her, and look where that had gotten her. He had used her, manipulated her for his own gain. No one could be trusted. I told you, I'm fine, Rachel repeated, her voice firm. She forced herself to meet Sarah's eyes. I just need some time to think, that's all. Sarah's face darkened with concern, but she didn't push any further. All right, but you know where to find me, right? She said softly. You don't have to do this alone. Rachel nodded, grateful for her friend's support, but the weight of her lies was too much to bear. She couldn't share this with anyone, especially not Sarah. She was already in too deep, and she didn't want to drag anyone else into the mess she had created. After Sarah left, Rachel locked the door behind her, her hands still trembling. Her thoughts were a blur of fear and confusion. Who was behind the letter? Was it someone from her past, someone who knew